Hello and welcome to this tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to learn basically how to install XAMPP on our computer and how to basically set up a database on the local host so that we could basically use the database in order to store the data. So the very first thing which we need to do is that as we will be working with a database which is an online database, we will need an online server or at least a server which basically helps us to add data into a database. So the very best thing which we could do in this case is we could download some software which provides us a server on our local host so that basically we could send queries to the local host and we could actually set up a database, a virtual database on the local host and access it. So the very first thing which we do is that we download an application which is called as XAMPP. So in order to download XAMPP, we type XAMPP, which is XAMPP download, and the first link which is going to pop up is from the apachefriends.org. So basically this venture actually has their own application which is called as XAMPP. So basically when you click on the link, you will be redirected to a page which has download links for Windows, Linux as well as Mac, or the OS X version of the Mac. And now the next thing which you need to do is that you simply need to download XAMPP and install it. So I would basically recommend you to download this version of XAMPP, which is 5.3, which is basically 5.5.33. So in order to download it, simply click this button and it is going to ask you whether to download the file. So simply click on save file and then it will, and once the file is downloaded and when you open it, it is going to direct you through the entire installation process. And the installation process is quite simple and you actually don't need to remember anything regarding the installation. So basically once the installation is done, the next thing which you could do is that you could close this browser, you could go onto the search bar and simply type in XAMPP, which is XAMPP, and it should redirect you to a control panel. So basically you need to actually check if XAMPP is actually installed on your computer. So if you open this thing up, you will be prompted with this window. Now actually when you download and install XAMPP, the server is not automatically going to start. So basically in order to start the XAMPP server, you need to open this thing up, which is nothing but the XAMPP control panel. And this control panel actually has options to basically start the Apache, which is the server, the MySQL, which we'll be using in order to save our databases. So basically when you open this thing up, the next thing to do would be simply click on start. So as you could see, the Apache, which is nothing but the server, has started. Now we also need to start up this MySQL, so also click start over here. And in order to make sure that everything is running properly, simply open up your web browser and simply type in localhost. So once XAMPP is actually installed properly on your computer, and when you go to the browser and when you type in localhost, this should be the page which you should be redirected, and this states that we have successfully downloaded and installed XAMPP on our computer. Now once XAMPP is actually downloaded, the next thing which we will do is that we actually need to switch to this phpMyAdmin. So this phpMyAdmin is nothing but it's like an admin panel basically to, you could say, control the databases, control everything which is present in the backend. So this is basically the admin panel for your website. So for example, if you have ever purchased like a domain name and a hosting for any website, you will be also presented with the same phpMyAdmin web panel. So this panel actually has functionalities to basically create a new database, create tables inside a database, and actually maintain your databases. So the very first thing which we will need to do here is that we actually need to create a database. So in order to create a new database, a brand new database, the very first thing which we do is that we open up phpMyAdmin, and as you could see, this is the window which you should be presented when you open up phpMyAdmin, and as you could see, there is this thing which is called as new, which basically is used to create a new database. So in order to create a new database, we simply click on this, and it is going to ask us the name of the database. So let's name this thing as project, and then simply click create, and you should be prompted with a small window which says database project created. So as you could see, when we create a new database, our database should be added up over here. Now once we have the database, we actually need to add in what you could say a table to the database, which is eventually going to hold the information which we are going to pass in. So let's create a table which is called as users. So let's say we want a table of users, which is basically going to, let's say, hold the user information like the username and the login password. So, and it is also going to ask us to enter the number of columns. So let's say the number of columns are 4, then click go. So when you click go, you will be prompted with this type of window, which basically asks us to enter the fields inside the table. Now let's say for a user, we need to save his name, his contact, his country, and his password. So in order to save it, in order to store these things into database, we actually need to allocate names to each and every field. So as we want to store the person's name, let's name the first thing as name, and for the second one, let's name it as password to store password. Then let's name the third field as contact, and let's say the final one is like his country. And once you have set up the names for the fields, the next thing to do would be to select the type or select the type. So type is nothing but it is going to basically ask us what we want to store in the name. So for the name, we are going to select text. For the password as well, we are going to go with text, and similarly for the other two fields, we are going to select text. Now basically, if you are storing the contact number of a person, you basically need to go with a field which says integer, but for the sake of simplicity, we are going to simply select this as a text. Now once we have set up the fields inside a table, and once we have set up the type of these fields, we could simply go ahead and hit save. And what this thing is going to do is that it is basically going to create a table for us with these 4 fields. So as you could see, now we have successfully created a brand new table which basically holds these 4 values. So the very first value is name, the second one is the password, then we have contact, and then we have country. Now the next thing which we need to do is that we actually need to insert some values into the database. Now the thing is that you could easily add values by using SQL. So if you are familiar with SQL, you could simply select this option right here, and then what you could do is that you could basically type in a SQL query so as to basically insert values in the database. But as we want our Android application to basically communicate with the database, the very first thing which we need to do is that we need to write a PHP script which allows us, or which allows our Android application to connect with the database. So the very first PHP script which we are going to write here is the script for connecting to the database. So now let's go ahead and write a simple script so as to connect ourselves with the database. So we simply close this thing and we open up our text editor. So I'm going to be using Atom, so I simply open up the Atom text editor, and inside the text editor we actually need to create a PHP script so as to make the connection with our database. So we simply go to file, create a new file, and what we are going to do is that we are going to save this file in the PHP format. And one more important thing which we need to remember while creating or saving this file is that we actually need to save this file in the location where all the files related to the server are actually present. So the very first thing which we do is that we check where our actual server is located. So if we open up File Explorer and go to C, and if we go to this folder which says XAMPP, and inside XAMPP we actually need to go in the htdocs folder. So this is basically a folder where we'll be saving our entire files, and in order to organize it in a much more proper way, let's go ahead and create a brand new folder, and let's name this as project. This should be project, and we are going to save our entire files in the project folder. And also make sure that you always save your files on the server inside XAMPP and inside a folder which is called as the htdocs. So this is the folder which is basically going to contain all the server files which we will be using. So, and also you could go ahead and create some folders in there so as to basically organize all the things in a proper fashion. So once we are done with this, we switch back to this PHP script and we save this in the same location. So go to File, click Save, and then basically go to the C drive, XAMPP, htdocs, and the folder which we will be using for this project is going to be project, and let's name this thing as init.php and simply click Save. And as you could see, now our file is stored in this particular folder which is project. So this is the file right over here. So now the next thing which we do is that we actually start writing the PHP script. So basically, as this PHP script is going to be for establishing a connection to the database, so the very first thing which we need to do is that we actually need to pass in the database name. So in order to check what our database name is, we again go to localhost, then we go to phpMyAdmin, and as you could see, the project is the name of our database. So basically we return back here, and then we store this thing, or we store the name of the database into a variable. So in order to declare a variable in database, we type $, then we type the variable name. So let's say we name it as db_name, which stands for database name, and then we type in the name of our database, which is nothing but project. Now the next thing which we do is that we also type in the username of the database. So by default, the name or the username of the database is root. So we type mysql _user, and let's name the user as root. So root is the by default name. Now we also need to pass in the server name. So we create another variable called as server name, and server name is going to be localhost. So once we have these three things set up, the next thing which we do is that we set up a connection. So we create another variable and let's name it as connection. So we type $connection equals mysqli _connect. So this is basically used in order to establish a connection, and to this we are going to pass in the parameters. So the very first parameter is going to be the server name. So we type $server name. Then the next parameter which we are going to pass is going to be the username. So the username is $mysql _user, and the next thing which we type in is going to be the password, and in this case by default the password is blank, so we are going to leave this field as blank. And the final thing which we are going to pass in to this is going to be the name of the database. So we type $db_name. So once we are done with this, we are basically good to go, and we have connected this thing to a database. Now the next thing which we need to do is that we actually need to check if this query is correct. So in order to make sure that the query written here is correct, we type if, and inside it we type if $connection, or let's say if not $connection, that means this line of code is returning a value false. So if it is not connected, then we want to print out the connection is unsuccessful. So we type echo connection not successful, or else we want to type in connection successful. So we type echo connection successful. So once we are done with this, we are basically good to go. So we simply save the code, and in order to check if this script performs correctly, we switch back to the browser, and in there we type localhost, and in localhost we have a folder which we have created which is named as project, and give a slash, and the file is nothing but init.php, which actually contains the PHP script to connect to the database. So once we have typed this thing in, we hit enter, and as you could see, we got the result as connection successful. So that's basically it for this tutorial, and that's how you basically connect to a MySQL database server by using PHP. So that's it for this tutorial, and in the next tutorial we'll learn how to basically add some elements to the database using PHP, and also how to extract the data from the database using PHP scripts. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thank you.